Every civilization leaves a final message, a last instruction, pressed into whatever it trusts to outlast it. For the oldest civilization we can read, the Sumerians, whose cities rose more than 5,000 years ago in the south of what is now Iraq, that trust was placed in clay. And among the tens of thousands of clay tablets they left behind, scholars have reconstructed something unsettling. The last role given to one particular god, in the final acts before the gods are said to have withdrawn from the world, was not to bless humanity, it was to warn it. The god's name was Enki. To the later Akkadians, he was Ea. And of all the powerful, distant, often cruel deities the Mesopotamians feared, Enki was the strange one. The one who, again and again, in text after text, stood on the side of human beings, even against the other gods, even against their direct command. This is the record of what Enki did, what he is said to have left behind, and the warning the texts attach to his name, a warning specifically about a return. To understand the warning, you first have to understand who he was, and why his final message would have carried weight that no other gods could. Enki was the god of the fresh waters. Not the sea, but the deep, sweet, underground water the Sumerians called the Abzu, the hidden ocean beneath the earth, from which springs and rivers were thought to rise. He dwelt there, below the world, in a palace of water. But he was far more than a water god. Enki was wisdom itself. He was the keeper of craft, of magic, of the secret knowledge that made civilization possible. When something needed solving that the other gods could not solve, it was Enki they came to. He was the engineer of the divine order, the one who knew how things actually worked. And he was the god of his city, Eridu. Hold on to that name, because it matters. In the Sumerian account of their own deepest past, Eridu was not just a city, it was the first city. The Sumerian king list, their record of the rulers who came before and after the Great Flood, opens with a single line: that when kingship first descended from heaven, it descended at Eridu. The oldest city on earth, in their telling, was Enki's. So when the texts speak of Enki leaving a final message, they are not speaking of a minor figure. They are speaking of the god of wisdom, the keeper of the knowledge that built the world, the lord of the first city. The one god who had spent the entire history of humanity, as the Sumerians told it, intervening on their behalf. What could make a god like that issue a warning instead of a blessing? And a warning about what? The answer begins with how human beings came to exist at all. Because according to the Sumerians, we were not born, we were built. And it was Enki who built us. In the Sumerian and later Akkadian account, the world began with the gods alone. And the gods, at first, had to work. They dug the rivers, they tilled the soil, they carried the baskets of earth. And after long ages of this labor, the lower gods rebelled. They surrounded the house of the chief gods, set fire to their tools, and refused to work. The solution they reached is recorded in a text known as the Atrahasis, one of the oldest creation accounts in existence. The gods would make a new being to carry the labor in their place, a worker, a servant. And the one assigned to design this creature was Enki, working alongside the mother goddess Ninhursag. The method is precise and strange. They took clay, the raw earth, and into it they mixed the flesh and the blood of a god who was slain specifically for this purpose. From that mixture, the first human beings were formed, part earth, part something divine, made deliberately by Enki's hand. Sit with what that means inside this story. Enki is not a distant creator who set the world spinning and walked away. In their account, he is the literal designer of the human body. The one who decided what we would be, mixed the ingredients, and shaped the result. Every later thing he does for humanity, he does for something he personally made. And almost immediately, that creates a conflict at the very top of the divine order. Because humanity was made to serve, but humanity multiplied and grew loud, and the chief god, Enlil, came to find them unbearable. The texts are blunt about this. Enlil, the lord of the air and the most powerful of the active gods, is repeatedly described as wanting humanity reduced, silenced, or destroyed. First by plague, then by drought, then by famine. And each time, as the human population is pushed to the edge of extinction, one god intervenes to save them. The same god. Every time. Enki. This is the pattern that runs through the entire mythology, and it is the key to everything that follows. There is a god who wants humanity gone, and a god who keeps saving them. The destroyer is the king of the gods. The protector is the one who made them, and the protector is, by the rules of the divine council, the one who is supposed to obey the king. Enki saves humanity not because it is permitted, but in defiance of what is permitted. He finds the loopholes, he whispers the warnings, he breaks the spirit of the divine law while keeping just enough of its letter to survive the consequences. He is, in the oldest literature humanity ever produced, something very close to a rebel acting on our behalf. And there is one more thing Enki held that the other gods did not fully control. The Sumerians called them the May. The May were the underlying decrees of civilization. Not objects, but the fixed patterns that made an ordered world possible. Kingship, law, craft, writing, even the forms of worship. The complete operating instructions for human civilization. And Enki was their keeper. The knowledge of how a world is supposed to run sat with the one god who had chosen over and over to keep humanity alive. Which brings us to the moment everything in the record turns on. The moment the chief god stopped trying to thin humanity out and decided to erase it completely. Before we go further, hold the shape of this together. A god who built humanity with his own hands. A king of the gods who wanted that humanity destroyed. And between them, one being who kept choosing the side of his own creation again and again against the highest authority there was. That is the situation when the final and greatest judgment arrives. The decision is made in the divine council. Plague had not worked. Drought had not worked. Famine had not worked. So Enlil calls for something total. A flood. A deluge to wipe humanity from the face of the earth completely and end the problem forever. And this time, Enlil does something to make sure Enki cannot interfere. He binds the gods with an oath. Every god in the council swears not to warn humanity of what is coming. Enki swears it too. What Enki does next is one of the most remarkable moments in all of ancient literature. He keeps his oath and breaks it anyway. In the flood account, Enki goes to the home of one man. In the Sumerian version, this man is named Ziusudra. In the Akkadian, he is Atrahasis, and later Utnapishtim. Enki does not speak to the man directly. That would shatter the oath outright. Instead, he speaks to the wall. He addresses the reed wall of the man's house, and through that wall, in words the man inside cannot help but overhear, he delivers the warning. Tear down your house, build a boat, abandon your possessions, and save your life. A flood is coming. It is a technicality, a loophole, exploited by the god of wisdom to save the species he made without technically addressing a human being at all. And it works. The man builds the boat, he gathers his family and the seed of living things, and he survives the flood that destroys everyone else. Every human being alive today, in this account, descends from the one man Enki refused to let die. Now think carefully about what that act tells us about Enki's final message. Because the flood is not framed in these texts as the end of the conflict. It is framed as a near miss. Enlil's intent, the total erasure of humanity, was thwarted, not satisfied. When the flood waters recede and Enlil discovers that a human survived, the texts describe his fury. The plan had failed, a loophole had beaten him, and the divine order had to be renegotiated, with humanity allowed to continue, but under new and harsher terms. This is the world into which Enki's last message is said to fall, not a peaceful world. A world where the most powerful god had tried repeatedly to delete humanity and had been stopped only by the cleverness of one ally who was running out of room to maneuver. The flood was the closest it ever came. And the question the record leaves hanging is the one that should make the hair on your arms stand up. If the destroyer was only thwarted and not satisfied, what stops it from trying again? That is the question Enki, the keeper of the deepest knowledge in the divine order, would have understood better than anyone. He had seen the pattern: plague, drought, famine, flood, escalating, each one nearly the end. He knew, better than any god or any human, that the threat to humanity had never actually been removed. It had only been postponed. And a being who understood that would not leave humanity with a blessing. He would leave them with a warning. To understand the warning itself, we have to follow Enki to the end of his active role in the human story, to the moment the gods are said to withdraw from the world. The Mesopotamians did not believe the gods stayed close forever. Their texts describe a slow separation. In the earlier stages, the divine and the human were intertwined. Gods walked in cities. Kingship descended directly from heaven. Beings of immense lifespan ruled the earth. And then, gradually, that closeness ended. The gods withdrew to their heavens. The direct line thinned. The age of gods walking among men became the age of men ruling alone, with only the records, the rituals, and the warnings the gods had left behind. And in those final acts of closeness, Enki does two things that define what he leaves humanity with. The first concerns a man named Adapa. Adapa was Enki's own servant, a man of Eridu, given by Enki a portion of divine wisdom greater than any human had held. He was, in a sense, Enki's masterpiece, a human being lifted as close to the divine as a human could come. And there came a moment when Adapa was summoned before Anu, the highest god of all, the god of the sky. Anu, in that meeting, offered Adapa the bread of life and the water of life. To eat and drink them was to become immortal. to gain, for himself and perhaps for all who came after, the one thing humanity had been denied: a life that does not end. But before Adapa went up, Enki warned him. He told his servant that what Anu would offer him would be the bread and water of death, and that he must refuse them. Adapa obeyed his master. He refused. And in refusing, he turned away the gift of immortality, at the very moment it was within humanity's reach. Scholars have argued for a century about what this story means. Did Enki make a mistake? Did he misjudge Anu's intent? Or did Enki, the protector, the one who always saved us, deliberately deny humanity the one thing that would have made us equal to the gods, because he understood what the other gods would never allow us to keep? The text does not resolve it, but the result is undeniable. Through Enki, immortality came within reach of humanity, and through Enki, it was refused. We were left mortal, left as we are, left, perhaps deliberately, short of the one thing that would have ended our vulnerability forever. The second thing Enki leaves is the me, the decrees of civilization. The knowledge of how an ordered world is built does not vanish when the gods withdraw. It is handed down. Writing, law, kingship, craft, the rights. All of it passes into human hands, the inheritance Enki made sure we would keep. The gods leave, but the operating instructions stay. And here is what unifies everything Enki ever did. He made humanity. He saved humanity from plague, from drought, from famine, and from flood. He kept us mortal, but he kept us alive, and he left us the knowledge to continue. Every single act points the same direction, a God preparing his creation to survive without him, preparing us for a world he knew he was leaving. And a God who spends the end of his time preparing his creation to survive alone is a God who knows there is still something to survive. So what, exactly, did he think was coming? Here is where the record turns from history into warning. The Mesopotamians did not believe the conflict between the gods and humanity was over. They believed the gods would return. Their entire religious system was built around watching for it. The sky was not decoration to them, it was a text. The movements of the planets, the stars, the eclipses were read as the deliberate signals of the gods, messages written across the heavens for those who knew how to read them. They compiled enormous catalogues of these signs, the most famous bearing the name of the two great gods themselves, Enuma, Anu, Enlil. Thousands of omens recording what each celestial event foretold: conquest, famine, the fall of kings, and the return of divine judgment upon the land. This is the framework Enki's final warning sits inside, not a vague prophecy, a system, a people who believed with total seriousness that the gods who had once tried to erase them would signal their intentions from the sky, and who watched the heavens, generation after generation, for the warning signs of a return. And what they feared returning was not simply a god, it was the judgment. The flood had been Enlil's instrument once, and the texts are explicit that it was the king of the gods, not a force of nature, who wielded it. The destroyer had been thwarted at the flood, not satisfied, and a thwarted will in this mythology does not disappear. It waits. It watches for the conditions to try again. Enki, the keeper of the deepest knowledge, the one God who had stood between humanity and that will at every turn, understood the pattern better than anyone alive or divine. He had seen the escalation with his own eyes. He had spent the terms of every judgment finding the loophole, the boat, the survivor. And the record of his final acts, the preserving of one bloodline through the flood, the careful keeping of humanity mortal but alive, The handing down of the knowledge to continue reads as the work of a God doing one last thing, leaving his creation everything it would need to survive the next time. Because there would be a next time. That is the warning the texts attach to the name of Enki. Not that the gods loved us, not that we were safe, but that we were made to serve, nearly erased again and again, saved only by the intervention of one ally who was now leaving. And that the force which had tried to end us had never been defeated, only delayed. The gods withdrew, but withdrawal is not the same as departure forever. The Mesopotamians watched the sky precisely because they believed that what leaves can come back. And so the final message Enki is said to have left humanity was not a blessing and not a reassurance. It was the truth, recorded in clay by the civilization that claimed to have heard it first. You were made. You were nearly destroyed. You survived only because someone intervened. That someone is leaving. Watch the signs, because what was held back, not ended. And one day, the conditions that brought the flood will gather again. 5,000 years later, those tablets sit in museums, and we read them as mythology, stories a young civilization told itself in the dark. Perhaps that is all they are, but the oldest civilization that ever learned to write did not spend its final words celebrating the gods who made it. It spent them recording a warning about the gods' return, and naming the one who tried to prepare us for it. The file remains open.